Hello and welcome to The Point. Today we're going to be talking about a fascinating topic called irreducible complexity. And we're going to be giving examples in red blood cells and the human heart. So Richard, are you excited? I'm excited about this program.
Good. Well, so am I. I tell you what, I'm so sorry that our young children and the young people at university are taught about evolution, and they never seem to be taught anything about creation. The fact is that the Bible is perfectly clear that God created the universe and he created humans as well. We're told in Luke chapter 3 in the genealogy of Jesus that Adam is the son of God, not the son of a monkey. Adam is the son of God. Now, I want to explain about irreducible complexity. Big word, rather a long word, a bit of a mouthful. Irreducible complexity. What on earth am I talking about? Well, it's a difficult word, a difficult concept to actually describe. It's much simpler to give an example. So I'll give you an example and then try and explain it. I have, like you, I have a human brain. Now, the human brain is the most sophisticated computer in the universe. It's unbelievably complex, far more complex than the biggest computer on planet Earth, which is in China. And it's about the size of a large, tall 10-story building, this large supercomputer in China. But your brain is far more complex than that. Now, our brain requires lots of things, but just for example, requires oxygen all the time and a constant supply of glucose for energy all the time. If you cut off the oxygen to my brain, within 30 seconds I'll be unconscious, and after 3 minutes I'll be dead. And the same with blood glucose as well. If you lower my blood glucose, I'll start fitting, and then I'll go unconscious, and then I'll die. Now, you cannot have something evolving in a primordial slime 3.8 billion years ago, little bits by little bits, and slowly becoming a brain, because a brain is a fully functioning computer. That's what it is. It's far more sophisticated than the supercomputer in China. And you can't have something evolving. No, it's incredibly complex. It's so complex that it must be fully functioning as a fully functioning central nervous system computer when we're first conceived, and when we're growing in our mother's womb, as in Psalm 139, we're fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm not sure if I've explained it very well. Laura, have you got a better way of explaining it than I have?
No, I don't have a better way at all, because the word irreducible complexity, to me, it conjures up a situation that you cannot get, for instance, with a Lego building, because with Lego you can add bits and come back a day or two later and add another bit to make this wonderful Lego structure. Yeah. But irreducible complexity is such that it doesn't work with evolution, because with a lot of the things we're going to be talking about today, they had to be all there in working order right from the word go. Excellent. God created and orchestrated all these organs and all these functions to simultaneously orchestrate them all to work together like an amazing symphony. You don't have a string instrument coming in now and then a percussion coming in a bit there and then a little bit of this here and keyboards there and timbales. It's all got to be together, and God created that wonderfully, as it says in yes. Psalm 139.
Yes.
So wonderful. That's irreducible complexity. And the thing about evolution is it says, well, this happened, and then a few thousand million years later, this happened. You can't. And I think we're going to show that in one of the fun facts. In fact, we've got two fun facts today, but we're going to go to one fun fact now. And this fun fact talks about the irreducible complexity with red blood cells, that they could never have evolved by chance.
Hello, my name is Richard Kent, and today I want to tell you that red blood cells in our circulatory system never ever evolved by chance in the primordial slime. No, our red blood cells were created by God. Let's have a look at our red blood cells. We've got millions and millions and millions of red blood cells circulating around our body in the circulatory system, and we've got 60,000 miles of blood vessels in our circulatory system with red blood blood cells going through all of these cells, and each individual red blood cell travels through the entire body in 1 minute. And inside the red blood cell is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is a very complex molecule, but I want to draw your attention to Fe, which is the element in the middle of that equation. Fe is iron, and iron is toxic, very toxic. In the Victorian era, lots of people died of iron toxicity. So only God could arrange for a toxic substance like iron to be present in our bodies in all of our millions of red blood cells. What do red blood cells do? Well, first of all, they bring oxygen to all of the tissues in our body. Secondly, they take away a waste product called carbon dioxide, which is produced by our metabolism, and take the carbon dioxide back to the lungs using a very important enzyme called carbonic anhydrase. And then secrete the carbon dioxide in the lungs, and it comes out in our breath. Now, here we come to the really important part about the whole business of erythropoiesis, which is the production of red blood cells in the bone marrow. The red blood cells are produced millions at a time in all the long bones in our body. In other words, in the humerus, in our upper arm, in the femur of our long bone of our leg, and our lumbar spine, our pelvis, and a few other bones as well. And there is how erythropoiesis works. But very importantly, the hormone called erythropoietin comes from the kidneys. Now, what happens is the kidneys very cleverly detect when the oxygen content of the blood is going down and produce an enzyme called erythropoietin to tell the bone marrow to start producing some more red blood cells. And here we have the most extraordinary situation. It's not a chicken or the egg. You have to have the bone marrow and the kidneys both present at creation in the case of you and me, at conception in our mother's womb, the DNA, the deoxyribonucleic acid, had to have the information to produce the red blood cells in the bone marrow and also the erythropoietin in the kidneys, because the kidneys can't survive without oxygen, and nor can the bone marrow. So both systems had to be present at the same time. So here we have a wonderful example of irreducible complexity. You need the bone marrow and you need the kidneys, both created at exactly the same time at conception. They couldn't possibly have evolved separately. They must be both created at conception at the very same time, and only God can create red blood cells. They couldn't have evolved. Thanks for listening, and God bless.
And welcome back to Fun Facts. Richard, I find your fun facts so informative and so interesting. I mean, the example of a mousetrap, I mean, exactly. It proves such a point, doesn't it? Yes.
Yes, you've got a mousetrap.
Yeah.
Either it works and catches a mouse, or there's a bit missing, like the cheese or the spring or the whatever, and it simply doesn't work. You can't evolve a mousetrap. It must work.
Yes.
It's the same with the brain, the heart, the lungs, the pancreas, everything else. Irreducible complexity.
Exactly. And as you said, you can't have the kidneys way before the red cells, the bone marrow before, because you need one to function the other, and you need the stimulation of one, the hormone from one, to trigger the other one off. And how can that happen if...
Well, the thing of it is, in the human body, there are thousands and thousands of different systems. I mean, you remember, you and I, we both studied biochemistry and physiology and anatomy. And all of these interdependent systems are all irreducibly complex. I mean, we've just chosen, we're about to talk about the heart, but we've just chosen red blood cells in the heart, but they're just part of thousands of different things. All must be perfect for the whole body to function, just like you said, as a symphony. That's what we said.
Absolutely amazing. And we have a creator who's done that.
Yes.
Who's put us together, knitted us all together in such an amazing way. But it all had to happen all at the same time. There wasn't years and thousands of years in between these things happening. So it's exciting to hear that. And I think we've got another example that we're going to go into, which is a fun fact on how the heart could not have evolved.
That's right.
Yes. Are we ready for that? Yeah.
Hello, my name's Richard Kent, and today I want to talk about the human heart, which never evolved by chance in the primordial slime or any other slime. No, the human heart was created by God. Let's have a look at the human heart. There is the human heart. It's about the size of a clenched fist. It's in the center of your chest, and it's probably one of the most important organs in your body. What it does is to pump blood. You have between 8 and 10 pints of blood in your 8 or 10 pints of blood in your body, and it pumps the red blood cells around your whole circulatory system. And you've got about 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body, and they're really important. So let's come back to what a pump is. Here is a type of pump. It's nothing like the pump that is in the center of your chest, but this is a pump from your central heating system, if you have one. Just a very simple pump, which is either on or off. And what it does is to pump hot water around your radiators and your hot water cylinder in the wintertime. That's basically what it does. Now, your heart is actually vastly more complicated. It has 4 chambers, not 1. And it pumps blood, first of all, to the lungs to pick up oxygen and get rid of carbon dioxide. That's on the right-hand side. And then it pumps the blood to the rest of the body full of oxygen. So there we go. That's what the heart actually does. But of course, the heart itself is unbelievably complex. It's actually 4 chambers. And they have to, it's actually 4 chambers. It's called the left and right atrium and the left and right ventricles. And there are 4 really, really important valves. The aortic valve, the tricuspid valve, the pulmonary valve, and the mitral valve. If you're trained as a doctor, you learn a great deal about these 4 valves. If anything goes wrong with any of these valves, you will be very, very ill. You'll be in heart failure. And it's not uncommon for people to have a aortic valve replacement, for example. That's a common one. Or a mitral valve replacement. The valves have to close absolutely tight and shut. Otherwise, you'll be in heart failure. But the blood vessel, the atria and the ventricles have to contract and relax at exactly the right time to get pumping through the lungs and through the body. Now, in order to get the the atria and the ventricles, the contracting, relaxing correctly, there's a really, really complex electrical system called the bundle of His. And the bundle of His is made of lots of nerves which pass down the center of the septum, dividing the 2 ventricles. And you've probably heard of the electrocardiogram, the famous PQRST complex, which is an electrical readout of the electrical conductivity going on in the heart in order to make the atria and the ventricles contract and relax at exactly the right time. Now, those are some of the various organs in our bodies. For example, our heart, our brain, our lungs, and lots more besides. And all of them need oxygen. If you cut off my oxygen to my brain for 30 seconds, I will be unconscious, and for 3 minutes, I will be dead. Now, there's no chance that, according to the evolutionists, the human heart or any other sort of heart evolved, because the brain would be dead long before any heart as complex as this one evolved. No, the human heart is made up of lots of cells, and each individual cell has a very, very complex genetic code in it to describe exactly how a human heart is designed. It's what we call irreducibly complex. God has created our heart, and it says so twice in Scripture that God has created our hearts. Thanks for listening, and God bless.
Again, a fascinating example of irreducible complexity in the way the heart and the structure of the heart and all the different chambers function, and the valves as well. And one of the things we know as doctors, Richard, is that when things go wrong, it affects the whole body.
Yes.
So the heart, you know, as you said, atrial valve replacements, very common, aortic valve replacement, very common. And associated with that is heart failure.
Yes.
It affects the breathing, it affects the tissues as well, as there's backflow of fluid. It affects everything, the clotting, the patients have to have blood thinners, and so many things are affected just by one little part of this complex heart not working properly.
Yes, absolutely.
That's amazing.
Yes. Well, I mean, the heart is just one example, but the heart is actually highly complex. It's about this size. The center of it is about the size of a closed chest, closed fist, and the center of your chest. Get it right there. But the thing is, there's an electrical system in there, and that is itself incredibly complex to do with this. The movement of sodium and potassium ions in and out of the cell with a semi-permeable membrane. I mean, have you ever heard of any such incredibly complex way of doing an electrical transfer of energy is having a semi-permeable membrane, for goodness sake? But anyway, that's the way God has chosen it. We don't have anything remotely as sophisticated as that. But those four chambers have to beat at exactly the right time to pump blood from the atria to the ventricle to the lungs, back to the left atrium, left ventricle to the rest of the body. And all those little valves have to shut tight and watertight 70 times a minute and all the rest. And you just described what happens when, for example, the aortic valve fails, which does happen. The whole body is affected. Well, the whole thing is irreducibly complex. The blood cells are irreducibly complex. The whole body is irreducibly complex because that is how God created it, and only He could have created the human body. And we have to remember that everything started as a single cell at conception, 9 months before we were born, and in that cell was was our genome, which is our genetic code, which has a genetic code for every single cell of our 100 trillion cells in our body, to give or take a few trillion, has the genetic code for every single one. So when we're describing a heart, for example, it has the genetic code for the tricuspid valve, for the ventricles, for the atria, for the sinoatrial node, for the atrioventricular node, for the bundle of His, for the aorta, for the pulmonary valve, for the pulmonary artery, the pulmonary vein, and all the rest. And it's so complicated, unbelievably complex. I cannot imagine how any evolutionist can honestly say that this all happened by chance in the primordial slime. It's complete rubbish. This is the most sophisticated. The human body is the most sophisticated machine on planet Earth. There's nothing else that comes even remotely close. It's unbelievably complex. And we're only discussing now the anatomy. When we get to we will be talking about the Krebs cycle in biochemistry, and we're talking about physiology later on, about how muscles contract, and how the blood sugar is regulated, how our temperature is regulated. All these different physiological processes are all irreducibly complex and all totally interdependent. For example, just to go on just a little bit, our heart needs energy, which requires ADP to be converted into ATP using the Krebs cycle, which is unbelievably complicated, and that has to happen as soon as the body starts to grow. It needs energy, so you can't have it. You can't have the Krebs cycle, which is unbelievable. Laura and I both learnt the Krebs cycle when we were medical students, but you can't have the Krebs cycle evolving by chance. It's ridiculous. And similarly, the body's acidity, we call it the pH, the temperature of the body, all other things to do with the body, all the anatomy and the physiology is tremendously affected by the acidity and the temperature of the body. If you get too cold, you die. If you get too hot, you die. And if you get too acid, you die. And if you get too alkaline, you die. It's all a total miracle. What do you think, Nora?
Absolutely. When I think about evolution, I think about a car. You know, if you think about the first Ford car and how basic it was, no seat belts, no this, no that.
Yes.
And I think, they had to put their hands out to, no indicators. You remember? We had to learn hand signals and all that sort of stuff. But you think about when I think about evolution, that's what I think about.
Yes.
The original Ford car, and now how many years later, what it is now. Big difference. That's evolution.
Yes.
And it can be reproduced. So you get these vintage car shows, these car rallies, where they actually reproduce cars that look like they were made in whenever the 1920s or whenever the first cars came out. That's evolution, because you can reproduce it.
Yes.
I'd like to see a heart being reproduced, as you said. I mean, just the kind of structure, because it's not just electrical, it's physical, it's muscle, it's electrons, it's osmosis.
Yes.
And diffusion, electrolytes, sodium, potassium, calcium.
Yes.
So you've got the physical, you've got the electrical, you've got the chemical side of the heart as well, and they've all got to work together.
Yes.
All those different facets.
Absolutely.
It's just amazing. How do you reproduce that?
Impossible.
Well, if it was evolution, it should be able. You should be able to, they should be able to say, well, this is how this became that. And we've got this missing link because the missing link doesn't exist, really. And so it really is fascinating to see that even when people try to mimic the human systems, and God has given us such amazing technology that we can make pig's bladders out of valves and things, we still cannot reproduce the original.
No.
We can mimic,
Yeah.
we can't reproduce the original, because the original was made by an original creator who only has the blueprint.
Absolutely.
So fascinating, really
And
fascinating.
I love to talk about this because some people who are not very educated seem to think that Christianity is not scientific. Well, that's rubbish. The human body is, whoever created the human body, God, who created the university, has to be the most amazing scientist. He has to know all about chemistry, biology, all the physiology, all the biochemistry, all the anatomy. We look at the human body and we see the handprint of an amazing scientist. And to someone who thinks that Christianity is not scientific, it's rubbish. I would turn around and say, of course, I would like to take on any evolutionist, Richard Dawkins, anybody else. And honestly, I would just give them the human body and say, let's talk about the human body. You choose which part, we just talk about human body. And honestly, I think I win, because I think God's on my side, because the human body is a miracle. It couldn't have happened by chance. It's irreducibly complex, and there's a reason for that. Only God can create life as we know it.
Totally. Now, we've only got 5 minutes left, so we're coming to the end of a really, really fascinating topic, Richard. And it can go on, as you said. You can sit somebody down and say, let's talk about the human body, the heart, the eyes,
Yes.
the red cells, even the red cells. I remember doing it to the point in the red cells. Even the shape of that red cell
Yes.
is absolutely amazing. And again, if it goes wrong, you've got that discoid, cushiony, marshmallow type consistency to it. And we know that if it goes wrong, we get things like sickle cell anemia, we get thalassemia, we don't get health when these things go wrong, we get disease.
That's right.
And therefore, God, who's created the blueprint for these things, knows how he created them. And again, we cannot reproduce them.
That's right.
We can't reproduce these things because God gave the DNA. He spoke his word and he said, this is how it is. And I've put everything in place for it to continue from generation to generation to generation.
Yes.
So red blood cells, blood types, everything, color of our eyes, it's all encoded in our DNA.
Yes.
And God has made the blueprint for that.
Yes.
So we're fearfully and wonderfully made, Richard.
We are.
And we're irreducibly complex human beings.
We are.
With there's no being that can reproduce what God has already done.
Yes.
Absolutely fascinating. Anything you'd like to add? We've only got a couple of minutes left. Would you like to say something?
Well, I mean, I don't suggest anybody does, but if you read evolution, you come up with these theories that that DNA can be changed in some way and produce something better. That's the theory behind evolution, is that our DNA can change. Well, Laura and I are both doctors. We have seen what happens when DNA is changed. It's changed by, for example, by chemicals like thalidomide. It's changed by a disease. It's changed by nuclear activity such as Chernobyl in Russia, and what you get is disease, and very nasty disease. You get spina bifida, you get anencephaly, you get Down syndrome, you get cancer, you get all sorts of nasty things. In the vicinity of Chernobyl, where there's a lot of radiation given off, there was no case of a superhuman coming out of the dust. What happened was a lot of dead people and dying people. And that's the truth. Evolution is a fraud. It's complete garbage, absolute rubbish. The truth is that God created the heavens and the earth, and he said, let us make man in our own image, male and female, he created them.
Absolutely. And that is something that we like to put forward and to the point, because that's what this program is about. It's about showing and about explaining how God's creation reflected in our bodies, in our minds and our bodies, in the way we function, can only be through one creator, the genius of the universe. I sometimes like to call him when I'm reading my textbooks and thinking, wow, 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 wow. He is a creator, and he created us wonderfully and fearfully, and we are irreducibly, complexly created. God has orchestrated us, and he's made us wonderful. And we will continue to bring exactly more examples of this, Richard. I'm looking forward to the next episode of Irreducible Complexity, because we can go through all the systems in the world. I mean, there's a song that goes, there is none like you, no one else. Yeah. I can search the whole for eternity long, and we will find that there is no one like our God. And we hope that you find that as well. We hope that you will interact with us. We hope that you will send us emails and encourage us, and also say what you want us to talk about. info@revelationtv.com. We look forward to getting feedback from you, and we will bring you some more programs very shortly. In fact, next week, more on the Word of God, more on irreducible complexity, more on nutrition, more on medical topics, more on we've already covered the Shroud of Turin, haven't we? Yes. But we're going to talk about other things to do with Jesus and his blood and the resurrection. So you've been watching To The Point with Richard. Thank you, Richard, and myself. And we look forward to seeing you again very shortly. Please interact with us. There's Roku, Facebook, and all sorts of other devices. And see you again soon. God bless you. Bye.